Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Joanna McClurg, and I am one of the BFI Film Academy Young Programmers this year. In our scene interviews, we sit down and talk with some of the most exciting emerging filmmakers about their work, their inspirations, and how they've gone about finding those key collaborators who have helped them to break into the industry. In the run up to the Future Film Festival, which starts on the 20th of February, we're using this season of Scene to think specifically about festivals and short films which have taken them by storm. Speaking of which, I am really pleased to introduce this week's guest, writer, director, and actor David Ledger, who's going to be talking to us about his debut short, Rejoice. Rejoice premiered at BFI Flair before going on to win the award for Best Script at Beeston Film Festival, and it received a nomination for Best British Short at the Iris Prize as well. Right now, it is showing at Flickerfest in Sydney, Australia, where we also find David. So thank you so much, David, for taking the time amidst your busy schedule to interview with us.
No, thank you so much for having me. So yeah, lovely to be able to chat.
Great. I'll dive right in then. You've described Rejoice as an ode to your grandmother, who I know sadly passed away in 2020. I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about her and her mark on this story.
Yeah, so I started writing the film about 2 months after she passed away. And really it kind of the seed of the idea was I wanted to write about the time that she spent still alive after my granddad passed away. So she lived for about another 6 years after he died. And it always struck me how she would always say that she wanted to kind of go before him. And I think that, as I said, that was sort of the seed of the idea of the film, and it made me, wonder why it seemed that she lived so kind of vicariously through him in many ways, I would say. And then it made me think about how kind of common a tale that is, I think, for many women of that generation, living through their husband's work and then kind of being left finding themselves, sort of by themselves, right? And then how do you live those remaining years? So that was sort of the idea where it came from, and then I kind of began to blur some fiction, sorry, with fact. And so yeah, the film is about this elderly lady called Winifred who unearths this book of erotic fiction that she wrote many years ago, and it's kind of like long since buried. Unfortunately, my grandma didn't actually write erotic fiction. I would love to say that she had done that. It would have been an incredible find. But she always used to love writing. She wrote. She was my granddad's, who was a vicar. She was the church secretary.
Mm.
And she did a lot of writing in the church. Kind of wrote like a gossip column for the church. And she also had this kind of very mischievous sense of humor that would often bizarrely and very humorously manifest kind of quite sexually sometimes as well. Like around the dinner table, it would just kind of come out and be like, wow, okay, grandma, don't know where that sort of came from. So I sort of fused all those things together, and her energy, and then yeah, created this character of Winifred. And ironically, her name wasn't actually Joyce. Her name was Winifred, but she hated the name so much that she wanted to go by Joyce. But I always used to call her Winifred as a bit of a poke, which she found quite funny when she was alive. So I thought it was one last kind of, punchline I'd call the character Winifred.
Nice. Oh, that's lovely. I know that in the beginning you found it a little bit hard to see anybody but your own grandmother in the role for obvious reasons. I mean, you've described the way the characters are so interwoven, but obviously there is this totally fictional element. Did you find it difficult treading that line between reality and stuff that you had kind of the creative liberties that you had taken? And did those become personal challenges for you?
I mean, I think ultimately I had a lot of fun with it. I would say. I think there was, as I was writing, as you rightly say, the energy of my grandma was very present. But as I began to sort of hypothesize about what this new character might do, I think that distinction, became clear. So, I had a lot of kind of fun mixing people in my life, as a lot of people do, I think, when they're kind of writing auto-fiction-y style stuff. The characters are amalgamations of people in my family. The mother character Jo is kind of an amalgamation of my mom and my auntie, and then the daughter character Laura is kind of my cousins and my sister. And I guess when you are like doing that style of kind of auto fiction, there's always a bit of a danger of you know of using people who are kind of like your nearest and dearest.
It's true,
You
and
know,
I think that it is a challenge for a lot of young filmmakers because the key piece of advice that we're always sort of told is, use real life, use what you know, and then you can get yourself into kind of quagmire where you're sort of um taking creative liberties with other people's lives. And that can sometimes feel like a tricky thing, but it sounds like actually for you, it was quite a liberating and nice thing. And as we put it before, like an ode to your grandmother, like a beautiful thing.
yeah, it was, and I think obviously she wasn't able to kind of give the sign off, because she was no longer with us. So that that was there, but obviously showing my family the script, and that was super important. And it was interesting with the first kind of cast and crew, friends and family screening we had. It was when my close family were all there, which was really interesting. But I think they were able to see the distinction, as I said, between this fictionalized version, but also, energy of my grandma was very, very much there, But I guess I like to think that the sort of the playful energy of the film, I think, comes from her, you
Yeah,
know. So I think I'd like to think that she probably would sort of, smile and raise her eyebrows,
sure.
but be happy with the sort of like this alter ego.
Yeah. So Amanda Walker ended up playing the character of Winnie. And I just thought her performance was totally magnetic, especially that sort of opening section where it's her voiceover reading the erotic fiction, which just perfectly sets the tone for the whole film. So can you tell me a bit about working with her and how she became involved with the project?
Yeah, I mean, she is amazing. I think like, whenever sort of actors and directors are talking about, colleagues, it's very easy to kind of like, become quite obsequious, but she is fantastic. She's just a fantastic like person. I remember when I went to her house for the first time, and we had a kind of a first read through. Like she just the energy she gave was amazing, and she dived right into the film's themes. She got like straight into it, and that it gave me so much confidence. Because obviously I'm a youngish guy writing about a character who is in many ways completely different from me. But yeah, just how open she was and how much she gave herself to it. Just I left that how I walked in, and the first thing I thought was, wow, Amanda looks quite a lot like my grandma. But I walked out and I was just, yeah, I walked out with a real spring in my step and such confidence. And she really, really gave me that. I remember she told me that she sent the script to her daughter before she sort of like decided to do the film, and her daughter um had sort of said, this is such an energy of you in this, you really got to do this thing. And I think hearing that was really, really important, because again, it suddenly, when you're writing these things, right, they are so personal. But even you're sat at your desk writing away, and then slowly that bubble expands, and
Yeah.
you bring people in. um and I think that is a really powerful thing when you see that people relate to, what it is that you're kind of attempting to do. So yeah, she was just brilliant from start to finish. And we did 3 long days of shooting, and she was 87, 88 at the time, a few years ago, a couple of years ago now. And, like an absolute trooper, honestly. I think I was more exhausted than she was. She was incredible. Yeah, she was great. And I met her because a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, who's a writer, had worked with her previously in a show. And actually, I was looking for a location for the house, and he suggested her house, which we didn't ultimately actually use. But then I Googled her and I'd recognized her and I thought, wow, to Thea, she'd be amazing. Do you mind if I, sort of try and get in contact? And yeah, that's how we met.
One of the really striking things about the story is Winnie's queerness. We so rarely see any kind of trace of sexuality in these stories about older people, never mind queer desire. What I really loved was that it remains somewhat ambiguous throughout the film. It's never particularly defined, and it's not like a major plot point as such. So I wondered how you approached that with such sensitivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, personally, queer stories where queerness isn't the central plot point is really in a really important brand of representation and is something that we are definitely beginning to see more of. So that was certainly in my mind. Um, and I think, from a character point of view, I wanted to present a character who wasn't able to realize her authentic self as a whole, right? So and that meant like her career path, her sexuality, even just like this sort of nebulous feeling of not being allowed to flourish, right? Um, which were brought about by these constraints of this kind of nuclear traditional life in the church that she led. Um, and in turn, I thought that almost kind of smorgasbord of lack of fulfillment that I think you see in the film, that lack of finishing, right, would give the greatest chance of representing many different women of Winnie's generation. And this, yeah, the somewhat ambiguous portrayal of her sexuality also, I think, yeah, it did come from a place of truth for the character, as I said, for Winnie, a woman of her time in the church, anything other than a straight life, it wasn't. I imagined for her, it wasn't even imaginable. So I think for her to be actively pursuing that narratively felt like it would have been inauthentic to the character. That makes sense. Ultimately, for all its sort of contradictions and all its complications, her life spent in the church, you know, she spent her whole life in the church, and therefore her platform in the film's climax. Sorry, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, grant you. For me, had to sort of be in the church. Um, so yeah, that was important that the character was able to embrace that kind of have a pretty contradictory element of her life as well, if that makes sense.
Hmm. It makes me think of something which you had said in an interview not that long ago, which really struck a chord with me. I've got the quote here. You said this: the younger generations have been afforded an emotional vocabulary that perhaps our grandparents weren't. You never know what divides a good conversation could bridge. And
Mhm.
what I'm wondering is, has this film sparked any of those really good conversations with your own family members or with older audiences at festivals?
Yeah, I mean, it has been really interesting. I think from a personal point of view, it sparked some interest. It sparked an interesting deep dive. It did as I was kind of researching my grandma ultimately, and I remember speaking to my auntie about her, and she told me things about her that I'd never known, I never knew. And it's funny, I still experience this with my family, love them obviously, but all the time, and this kind of this infuriating lack of communication, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of stiff upper lip Britishness, um, which I think is, you know, brilliant fodder for filmmaking. So maybe they shouldn't stop doing that. Uh, but it means that, stuff can get taken to the grave, right? And that's tragic. Yeah, so it's been interesting just observing that in my own family. But of course, certain conversations happening, and as I said, finding things out about my grandma that I never knew, and yeah, things that I wasn't able to include in a short film, but obviously built this world. Um, and then in terms of film festivals, the first thing that sprang to my mind when you said that was when it played at the Vancouver Queer Film Festival back in September. The whole program was about elderly love.
Ah,
Um, it was delightful. The audience was just full of, well, not exclusively, but a lot of older people, and it was it was really moving actually. It was really beautiful. And they were there because they want to see themselves represented on screen, right? And I remember one guy at the end during the Q&A stood up and basically just sort of said, they said it was just nice to see, someone of his age, different gender, sure, but of his age, represented in that way, and that character sexuality and of that age. And there is a complete dearth of sexual representation past the age of, I don't know, like 50 or something on screen, and certainly for women, so that's been really lovely, I guess, seeing people connect to it in that way. And I remember with Amanda, like I said, in that first read through, she dived straight into into those topics, and we spoke about it, and her opinion was just like, we still do these things, right? They still happen. And yeah, I think it's important that we see more, more protagonists, more older protagonists, full stop.
totally. Totally. So Rejoice was your debut short. And I know you worked with the cinematographer Abby Hercombe, who you've gone on to work with on your upcoming second short, Odd Socks. Could you tell me a little bit about your relationship with her and what it's like, the collaboration between yourself and your cinematographer?
Sure. I mean, it's been fantastic. She's great. She's great at what she does. She's a great person, and we have formed like a lovely friendship. We didn't know each other prior to Rejoice. We were introduced by one of the film's producers, Alex. And yeah, we just sort of like just hit it off. Initially through, similar frame of reference, which was, made working together. It's made perfect sense. And yeah, there was a language there, I think, from the get-go. And that's, that sort of thing is gold dust, and I'm sure people can look for a long time to find someone like that. But I was fortunate that she was kind of the first person that I sort of met. And as I said, she's a brilliant professional. She also worked professionally as a gaffer as well.
Okay.
So, her experience in lighting, especially when time is exceptionally short on, short film shoots, has been just, yeah, it's allowed us to get so much more done than we would have done. She's brilliant, and it also now means that as I'm writing new stuff and planning, future shorts and hopefully eventually, features, we're able to talk about those ideas as I'm writing,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, we're collaborating early doors. I'll send her drafts of things, and she can feedback on them. And having such a strong working relationship, and obviously friendship as well, but having such a strong working relationship, it really feels like something's sort of been unlocked in the filmmaking process for me.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I guess for all those sort of aforementioned reasons.
Got it. I know that as a director, you have to wear a bunch of different hats. There is that technical side, which probably Abby helps with a lot. Also
Mhm.
like the super creative side, whenever, everything is an option and you're just generating a lot of ideas. And you have to kind of switch between the creative mindset and the technical mindset, and then this like organizational mindset where you're this leader really quickly. So can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of manage that and switch between these mindsets?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough, you know. I think that it is it's I find myself I find out that I have to nurture the creative side of things, you know. It's always there for me, but I think like by degrees. Um and there's a lot of noise, in the world, right? And just responsibilities and reasons to not allow yourself to have to carve out the time to be creative and to allow your mind to drift into that space. It does it. It kind of, it's funny. It's like in a week where everyone's sort of plucking out their favorite David Lynch quote, right? It does remind me of something that I saw him say like a number of times in different interviews about making sure that you make space to daydream. And I think it's hard because that needs to be nurtured. It's very easy to be practical, to kind of wake up every day and just get on and do, which is obviously super important in filmmaking, and you have to, as you say, like you have to wear that hat probably the majority of the time. But yeah, you have to allow I space for ideas to come. Even if it's things like making yourself go out on walks, you know, stopping and just slowing down as well. Because I found that those are the times when a lot of ideas come. Just I'll be out on a walk and I'll kind of grab my phone and I'll just voice notes myself something, just an idea, or I'll write it down. But yeah, if you're kind of going all the time, then that space, isn't there. So yeah, it's a constant balance, I would say, those two energies and those two different hats. But at the same time, I love being able to do both.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it. It taps into very different sides of myself. Sides of myself that I think over the years I found quite contradictory and dissonant, and been unsure how they both sit and marry within the same person. But yeah, I think definitely sort of writing, directing, it feels like that a real confluence of those two things.
Lovely, lovely. And of course, whenever you've put in all the graft and you've kind of gone from having this small little seed of an idea to broadening out the scope of it and including all these other people, then you have the great pleasure, hopefully, if you are sort of lucky and the stars align, of going and seeing that with audiences at film festivals. So can you sort of give our audience a few tips or thoughts about what they can expect from film festivals? What sort of approach they should take to the networking side of things?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm doing that obviously as we speak. With networking, it's a funny thing, and I think very often you're in these situations and you're flung into them, and you kind of have to, I guess, sell yourself a little bit to a point. And some days it's cool and it's fine and you feel like you're on it. And then other days you don't, and you're tired, or like you're super jet lagged, for instance. And that's not easy, but I do believe that, it's very important to just put yourself out there. And I would say, if you feel like you have the capacity to, if it's within your kind of like, that sort of zone of your tolerance, then just go to as many as you can and just kind of put the shifts in. I think that often you'll go and you'll walk away from kind of networking things and you think, wow, I didn't need to be there. I'm not sure what I got from that practically, emotionally, like spiritually. But then other times, you will. And I think if you show up, then you play the lottery. You got to be in it to win it, right? So it's important just to kind of just go and put the time in, but also I think know that other people there are probably also tired, and other people there are probably also don't want to be there too, but they're there. And it's funny, I was speaking to a fellow filmmaker here at Flickerfest, and there's someone who has like produced quite a lot of high profile like things in Hollywood as well, and they were saying to me that just like how tired they were,
Mm.
and kind of the things that I just mentioned. And we spoke for quite a long time about the networking thing, and that it can be tough. But yeah, I think it's important to go. Takes a lot of confidence. Not everyone warms to it. But just know that not if you don't feel like you're totally thriving and relaxed, there are probably other people who are feeling exactly the same as well. Um, yeah.
Brilliant. Um, one other part of the process, which I would really love to talk about, is getting a film financed, which can
Mm,
be a really, really challenging aspect of it.
mhm, mhm.
You'd be happy to tell me a little bit about how you found the finances to make Rejoice and also to fund the festival run as well, which can be a kind of unforeseen cost.
Yeah, I mean it's the kind of perennial question, how do we finance, and okay, so with Rejoice, um so Rejoice production cost was £15,000, and then festival costs were on top of that, and they came to probably about 1,300. Um, I funded all of that via a combination of, so my grandma left me 5 grand when she passed away. I used that for it. And then I financed some myself through working. The rest of it was my mum, my dad, and my dad's partner, and a family, my godmother as well. So that's how I financed the film. Um, and that's my one probably like go at doing that from those people. But it allowed me a chance to make my first short film, right? And I think it's just really important that we are able to talk about the money side of this as openly as possible. Some people will get funding, some people will fund it themselves, and it's cool. Like that it's cool, but I think we just need to be really, really kind of honest about how we finance them, especially if we've kind of like self-financed them, just to sort of like strip away the mystique of how it's done. Otherwise, like these kind of structures of kind of privilege are like always just kept intact by this kind of like mystical veneer. Odd Socks, for instance, that was financed by a friend's dad who was looking to get into film financing, and sometimes you have got to think outside the box, and you've got to be creative, and you have to kind of go and go and go. But yeah, I think it's important that those things are like spoken about, and that's okay. And obviously people, like I said, the people will get official funding. The BFI is incredible, and but I also kind of believe that I do sort of believe that financing should go to people who like absolutely can't, who couldn't afford to make films otherwise. Um, but yeah, I don't know how I will finance my next short, to be honest. And that's after having like, made one or two now. And a lot of filmmakers will find themselves in this position, having made a number of short films, and they're still asking themselves, how do I make the next one? So, I know there's no like answer there particularly, in terms of how to finance, but I think what I would say is, if you are yet to make your first short, and you feel like the money side of it it's kind of insurmountable, I think you just have to do whatever you can to make that first one, whatever you need to do. You call on friends, you call on family. If you think you might have some rich work colleagues or something, I don't know, like just tap into it, and you have to be tirelessly tenacious, but what I would say is, once you have made that first short, the belief that it's given me to like push on. Honestly, it is like rocket fuel. I feel like I don't know how I'm going to finance my next one, but I know somehow I will. It will get done. But I didn't feel that before my first one.
Got it. Got it. Well, that's incredible. And good advice, I think. Uh, I know we need to wrap up pretty soon, so
Mhm.
I will ask you one more question, which is, if you could give a young filmmaker wanting to sort of start on that first short one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Um, yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard one to answer without sort of like being totally trite.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I guess
but I
if it's helpful, because
yeah.
I'm thinking specifically in the context of festivals, is there a piece of advice
Oh.
that you give to a filmmaker who wants to not just have a short that they kind of make and sort of sits on their laptop, but that actively gets seen in festivals? Is there any kind of little formula or anything that could help them?
I think I think so. A couple of like specific things. Number one, if it's your first short, if you think you can get it below 15 minutes, try. Especially if you're a debut. The amount of shorts that I've seen that have come in around the 15-minute mark, including my own, mine is like 14 minutes and 59 seconds and 23 frames, like literally, literally. And that was my editor's, that was him getting it down. Because it does help. The program that I'm in here at Flickerfest, I had a look earlier on, and the max is 15 minutes. And that isn't the case with all of them by any means. But I think, especially if it's your debut, getting it below 15 minutes does really help programmers just to slot your film in. Um, what else would I say? Yeah, a lot of festivals are looking for comedy. So if you think you've got that bone in you, that can help, even if it's sort of like dark comedy, drama. which kind of is what Rejoice is. And then other than that, I think just like I said, just tenacity, um, and that will look different for different people. Some people will put themselves out there loads and get their name out there. Other people find that a bit daunting and they put it into their work, into their art, and they will write and they'll write, and that's amazing. So yeah, I think those kind of specific things, but then just go out there and be tenacious and just don't stop until you make it.
Fabulous. And what's coming up? Odd Socks, you mentioned. That's
Yeah,
another tour. Is it also under 15 minutes?
it's actually under 30 minutes. It's like 12.
Oh, you're getting better.
It's getting shorter and shorter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's coming up, which is a short that's written by a friend of mine called Theo, who's a great writer, and I directed it. It's a comedy crime procedural pastiche with brilliant actors. Patterson Joseph is in it, of Peep Show fame, and Sandy Toksvig. So that's coming out. That's going to start its festival run very soon. I've written a feature of Rejoice, and I'm currently looking for a script editor to work with and development labs, and ultimately the holy grail of financing at some point. And then other than that, just shorts, more shorts. I wrote a couple more shorts last year, and I need more practice, and I think as filmmakers, shorts are our proving ground, and that needs to be encouraged, because we have to practice, and unfortunately, it's a very often a very expensive way of practicing. You can't just sit down with a canvas and paint. It's expensive, but yeah, making more shorts soon, I think.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Well, with that, I think we call it a close. Thank you, David, for being so generous with your time and your answers. It's been a total pleasure to chat with you. And to everyone watching, I hope you found the conversation really motivating and insightful as well. Please do make sure to watch Rejoice if you haven't already via the link in the BFI Film Academy bio. Also, if you are an aspiring or early career filmmaker yourself, remember that the BFI Future Film Festival starts next week, running from the 20th of February to the 6th of March. We have a really exciting range of screenings and events which will be taking place at the BFI South Bank and in venues across the UK, as well as a lot of free online events too. So if you want to get involved with the Future Film Festival or watch any of the other scene interviews from this season, you can again click the link in our Instagram bio. Next season, we will be interviewing the prize winners from the Future Film Festival. So there is a lot to look forward to. Thank you very much once again, and I shall see you soon. Goodbye.